Okay, City of Laredo Technical Review Board Ad Hoc Committee is meeting. Today's Wednesday, June the 6th. It's about 5:15 in the afternoon. We're meeting at the City Council Chambers. We'll call the meeting to order.
Yes, Mr. Ruben Benny Salinas.
Present.
Mr. Daniel Wires.
Present.
Mr. Armin Van Loor. Mr. Juan Salinas. Mr. Cesar Cantu. Mr. Jesus Ruiz. And Mr. Edward Ochoa.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
We'll consider the item number 2, citizens' comments. Or staff? No, that's, any citizens' comments? No? Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, consideration of approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of February the 2nd, March the 1st, April 3rd, and May the 2nd.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, number 1 and 2 have already been approved. I'm just putting them on there in your package. April 3rd and May 2nd are. Actually, it's April the 4th. It was supposed to be on the 3rd, but we moved it up. It was to the 4th. I'll change that typo.
Well, just one question. I don't know if we need that speaker box, it's a small group. May 3rd, I can't remember whether that's here or not, but
No.
I'm shown as absent, but yet,
Yeah, last meeting, May, you were out. It was, I believe.
but I made a motion to adjourn.
You should have.
Which is fine.
Oh, that was the one where we had the irrigation meeting, yeah, Mr. Wires was running. That's when you were doing your exercise, right?
The May?
Yeah.
Okay, let me check that.
Well, I think the motion was made by Mr. Salinas and seconded by Johnny. We'll recognize Armand Van Loor. We're going over the minutes. Yeah, April the 4th and May the 3rd.
Yeah, the May 3rd, he didn't motion to adjourn. He wasn't here. It was Mr. Juan Salinas.
Okay, so.
On the minutes for April April the 4th, on
Yes.
page 3, where you make reference to Mr. Sergio, it's Sergio Galindo.
Okay,
You put XX.
yes. Just trying to figure out his,
I don't know if he's a PE or not.
I didn't know either. I think he's at EIT or not. So I'll change that.
I think he got his PE already.
Oh,
He was the EIT, I think he, I'll put him at the EIT.
EIT?
Engineering training.
Okay. Okay, so it's further down, you have them at Sergio XX also.
Yeah, there's two places where he spoke. I'm sorry. Last name is Galindo?
Galindo, yes, sir. At the April 4th meeting, didn't we also make a motion to remove the triaxial testing? Was that in here?
On the April,
April 4th, because that was after the city council,
it was in the March.
was in the March?
That was originally, that was where Mr. Rivera, Mr.
Okay.
Rivera,
Okay,
and then on the April meeting, that's where
we
we
addressed, we
readdressed the
the
revised, the one that was going to be
for the
published,
French
yes, but
drains, and then corrected the slurry.
That's correct.
So can we approve the minutes of April the 4th with those two corrections? Just correcting Mr. Sergio Galindo's last name and designation. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 4th minutes with the corrections noted.
Second? Any second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the next set of minutes.
March 1st.
So did you have that? Did you have the May minutes in here?
Hold on.
I can't find my May minutes.
May,
March 1st?
let me see.
No, May 2nd, or May, I guess it's either May 3rd.
There's only 2 sheets.
You don't have it. If you turn on your monitors, it should be on the screen if anything else.
How do you make the screen smaller?
I was absent, Mr. Chairman, if you want to just review my copy.
Okay.
This is where Mr. Ramon Chavez basically updated the committee, providing you a copy of what the latest new pavement ordinance And there were some items that he wasn't showing on the hard copy he had presented to the committee, which there were three items. One was the ADHOC text dot. The other one was the groundwater. There were some revisions after that, those initial revisions. And they're the ones that show on the screen. It is my understanding that this ordinance has passed at City Council Monday.
Correct. Is it passed?
So this is
So
the
final-
wording, and I don't know if you,
Okay, so is this the meeting where we had the first meeting?
this is
of
the meeting, this is the May meeting, last month.
Last
Where
month.
we were, Mr. Ramon Chavez had brought up how he had provided some revised, the ordinance, the wording. There
Yes.
were some things that were missing, and these are the things that were, this is what was said on the May meeting,
Okay,
what you're seeing on the screen. And I thought I had printed that out for you in paper copy, apparently I didn't.
And this is what was passed at,
And yes, and that's my understanding, it was already passed by city council on Monday.
okay.
can you scroll down on this thing? Just
Sure.
a minute?
Just to kind of paraphrase, after he presented the report, you commented, Mr. Ruiz commented that there was some wording that was still, that were not included.
Yeah, no, so he brought
Right.
the paper, but it wasn't complete.
Correct. So then, he also spoke on, Mr. Chavez also spoke on, for the irrigation ordinance, how it is important for the irrigation ordinance to be looked at promptly. At this time, we presented it to the committee in May, that it's basically in 2 chapters of the Code of Ordinances. Chapter 25 of the plumbing code, or plumbing, that's where building department does plumbing inspections. And then chapter 31, there's a section that speaks on irrigation, mainly xeriscape. It's under the water conservation. So, and then Mr. Chavez suggested to the committee to establish some parameters to focus for irrigation, and basically he suggested 3 basic parameters, which were the location of the irrigation heads, inspection, and enforcements. And if these minutes are approved, that would be what staff would want this committee to accomplish today, is to establish the scope of what we will be looking at for the irrigation ordinance. Basically in these parameters, there were some other things that were talked about that I have here in front of you, such as things that were asked as how many gallons per minute. I believe Mr. Linares had asked, what is a typical irrigation system use, and can utilities department, with the type of meters that they have, can they determine if they have an irrigation system, and we can confirm it, because sometimes they don't get permits. And so we don't, or sometimes they don't get a meter, they just put an irrigation system. So they still need to establish that they have a backflow preventer. And Mr. Chavez also pointed out that as a lot owner, they have the right, it's a homestead, they have the right to install their own sprinkler system. So one of the things that this committee also talked about last time was that some kind of educational training, not only to the irrigators and inspectors, but to the landowner or the property owners that have irrigation systems. So,
Can we move up on the page so we can go through it?
yeah,
Just move.
you want me to keep scrolling?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me where to stop. The motion that was presented last time from Mr. Juan Salinas and second by Mr. Ruben Salinas, was to limit to 3 meetings for irrigation starting today, June the 20th, and then the next meeting, which is July 4th, which is something we still need to address. Obviously, we're not gonna meet on July 4th, so we would need to schedule that. But, again, these were the things that were discussed in the last meeting, which was the location of irrigation heads, inspections, enforcement. Some other things that were talked about was overwatering. Mr. Salinas had asked, how do we enforce the overwatering issue? Also educating licensed irrigators and plumbers of what the current irrigation ordinance states. Also, as I stated before, educating property owners' responsibilities of having an irrigation system.
Scroll up. Scroll.
Keep scrolling?
Yeah,
So basically, that was,
that was it. Okay. So, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
not on paper copy, on electronic
Yeah,
copy,
electronic.
which I will.
There's a motion by Edward. A motion by Cesar. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Salinas. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay. Any communications from staff? Item number 4.
Yes, again, right now, staff, obviously, we need to reschedule the July 4th meeting. We should have caught that on at the beginning of the year when we had, we always meet on the first Wednesday of the month. It just happens to be on July the 4th for July. So that's one of the things we need to address. Again, the scope of what we will be discussing in this irrigation ordinance.
Hopefully, we're gonna finish with this in 2 meetings so we can get right onto the irrigation.
Okay?
So the goal
So
is.
with that in mind, I really just ask that anybody that speaks or that they state their name for the record so that we could, so.
Just in case we do have just one item to just briefly explain.
Everyone, there's no need to go ahead and sign in, but all you need to do is when you come up to the front, state your name for the record, and then you can go ahead and speak. And so now we have the mic is open for anybody that's wishing to speak.
Just on the, you're right now at the communication still, right?
Right, so we would need to close that item and open item number 5.
Just in case, just briefly, what I just want to just provide information on the last council meeting, Councilman Rodriguez was trying to put a motion for the TRB to look into the item when it comes into setbacks. Unfortunately, the lights did go out at city council. And so that topic didn't come through, but at least I just wanted to provide some just feedback that pretty much probably on the next city council, he'll probably make the motion about that. And pretty much the idea or the concept or concern is in regards to being a bit more flexible for the homeowner in regards to the setback, guaranteeing from the city's aspect, we still want to work with that fire safety and enclosements. And so it's an array of items. I won't go into detail, but just look into near future in regards to building construction, in regards to reducing setbacks.
Let me ask you, Richard.
Sure.
We can't set it as an agenda item for next month, even though Vidal hadn't,
Well, we set the agenda right before the meeting.
Okay.
So if it goes to the next council meeting,
I got you.
then we'll add it to the agenda for that.
Right, it would need to be directed by council.
Correct, yeah. So we would still have to wait for that. So hopefully that motion goes through on the next meeting.
And speaking of that, also, there's another item that this committee had brought up,
For the July meeting, we've got the tree ordinance.
right, but there was an item that this committee had voted on to take to city council from building department facilitating this committee to look at administrative plats.
Yes.
And again, that's also something that city council would need to
Take action.
direct this
Yeah.
committee. as far as staff, we've talked to Nathan's department, and they're aware of that. He's already aware of the setbacks and also the easements, as Mr. Lianes has pointed out. So I don't have anything else.
Okay, that's it for my end, awesome.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us about, hoping we get one of the councilmen put administrative plats on the, on one of their items.
And
so
just
we can
to
address it.
remind everybody, if they're not aware, the discussion was to broaden the scope of what an administrative plat is in case there's, right now, there's very limited scenarios that qualify under the administrative plat. So for just moving a lot line or something to that effect, they would have to go the whole 9 yards. And since the one-stop shop has been implemented, that has been the way planning and one-stop shop and building department has been handling. It has to go through the whole 9 yards of a replat.
If I may, as I recall, it might have changed, but it used to be on your definitions, on your land development ordinance, it said that when there was a dispute on boundary lines between neighbors, that you could go ahead and do it through an instrument to change the boundary, and you could go ahead and plat it. Well, it said it's not a plat because you're not creating a new lot, and therefore you didn't have to plat it. And your definition on chapter 2, your land development ordinance.
Again, I'm not that well versed on the exact wording on what needs to be done. It does need to go to planning and zoning department.
But that was an exception, and it was on chapter 2, on definition, because you were not creating a new lot, and it was just a question of just cleaning up.
Like a Scrivener's error or something.
Yeah, because
Right, and
they went over a foot into the neighbor's yard. So the neighbors bought that 1 foot from the adjacent property owner, and you didn't have to replat it. You were not creating a new lot. And therefore, it was exempt from having to be platted.
Well, right now,
Again, it's-
right now we have to, so.
Right.
It'll be
It is a
worthwhile.
it is a
But
policy.
It wasn't, unless it got changed, but in the land development ordinance, that was one of the exceptions,
Well,
where you didn't have to do it.
The policy is now, where every change is going through the.
Right, the policy right now is there's very little scenarios that qualify under a,
Right, well, we're digressing.
yes.
We're digressing, so let's get back
Okay.
on.
So anyway,
get back on task.
but that would be planning and zoning department and maybe even the planning and zoning commission, but that, I'm just telling you, this committee voted to take that to the city council, but it needs to be, 1, directed by city council, and 2, it needs to be that department that handles that. So I'm
Right,
just,
we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
it's just as communications, and I don't have anything else.
That's it.
So we can close this item and move on to,
we'll close
The item
item 4 and move on to item number 5. Discussion with possible action regarding the City of Laredo irrigation ordinance, chapter 25 -80 through 25-85 of the code ordinance, and section 24-83.10, section 5 of the land development code, and any other matters incident thereto. So we'll open up the item, and I guess that just for the sake of the irrigators that are out in the public, as we went through the pavement ordinance, the concern from staff and obviously from some of the council members themselves is the issue of over irrigation. In other words, where you drive down the streets and you're seeing the water just, running down the street, and even in some subdivisions, you see the curb and it's marked. I mean, where all the water is constantly, there's a definite mark there where the water is. So, having said that, when they approved the pavement ordinance, the changes to the pavement ordinance, they wanted this committee to look at the current irrigation ordinance for those 3 items in particular, and any other items that we need to address in the ordinance. Principally, trying to, number 1, possibly moving the sprinkler heads further away from the property, further away from the property line, as opposed to being right at the property line. So it's get further away from from the street. And then look at the existing ordinance that we have today, and are we following those procedures? Do those procedures does that ordinance need to change? And so having said that, we'll open it up for any comments.
Roland, can you put the table of contents on the screen, or at least on the projector?
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me put the,
And just following along the lines from Tree Ruiz, what we pretty much trying to present here, just to help kind of give the flow of the meeting. And pretty much we wanted to address 3 points, one being the location of the irrigation heads, inspection and enforcement. And so if anything, thank you for the irrigators pretty much for coming by. Thank you, John, and also for the committee members inviting the respective, irrigators. And so we're wanting pretty much guidance. And if whatever you guys can help us on your feedback, your experience from the past or current, just anything that would help out, Thank you.
also let me add, what is currently being practiced as far as location of irrigation heads in reference to close to the right-of-way or at the property line? And what, if anything, the intent here is to not overwater or not allow water to be coming into the right-of-way. That is, as engineering staff, public works, and even city council is directing this committee to do that. So, that's just what I want to say.
Pretty much when it comes to location of irrigation heads, I know when it comes to the ordinance, they're not allowed on the right of way unless it is for the trees or such. But one concept that we were talking up here, and which we kind of listed it as an idea, nothing final to it, is pretty much trying to set the irrigation heads 4 feet inside the property. I don't know if that's a good idea. When it comes to irrigation, I see not, and pretty much that's an initial thought. What do you guys believe on that, or do you think it's more of the sprinkler head or anything like that? And that's where we're wanting guidance of.
You want us to go up there?
Yeah. We need pretty much feedback. Yeah, just to say a good idea, bad idea, or anything like that. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Moreno. I'm the owner of Olympia Landscape. And just a couple of statements. We are allowed to install irrigation heads right at the curb. You have to get a right-of-way permit. You pay for it. You're allowed to do that. If you don't have a right-of-way permit, then you have to put the heads 4 feet in where the property lines are. So, several things we can do. Thought of, you can zero-scape the bottom half of the city right-of-way, which is from where the water meter location is at, to the bottom, to relieve that water issue you have from the pavement. Or you can use granite, oversized rock. You can do drip lines. There's a lot of issues that we can do. So, you have anything to say?
That's basically what I was gonna say. You can zero-scape or you can use drip closest to the curb. And just get rid of using spray heads or rotors in those areas. And some cities basically say no irrigation at all. But typically, like in San Antonio and Corpus, you can put drip, and even for grass. You can use drip lines for grass. You don't have to have spray heads or rotors for grass.
Can you just tell us your name for the record?
Richard Can.
Okay.
Also, what do customers ask for? Do they want grass?
I'll tell you one of the things that I've always been against in Laredo, and a lot of people, don't like it, is San Agustin has a big water requirement, and it's used everywhere here in town, and it's really not meant for areas that are this hot, and I would, if anything, I would tell people not to use San Agustin anymore. Use Bermuda or El Toro Zoysia or
or some other grass that has less water requirements.
Okay, so, I was kind of confused. So you're saying that with, the irrigators, so long as you have a right-of-way permit, you're allowed to put,
That I'm not sure because.
Yes, I do a lot of residential work, and as long as you have a right-of-way permit, it's for residential, it's a $50 fee, for commercial, it's $250. Then you can put irrigation
John,
in
is that
the,
correct?
in the right-of-way.
That's correct.
That's correct.
and is that in this ordinance? Because I didn't see that in this.
That should be in the ordinance, sir. Not in the one in particular that we have now. It comes out there, where the, excuse me.
Yeah, what
Planning
section?
John Laredo, I'm the city plumbing inspector. It is, in the ordinance.
So under what section is it under?
I'm not aware of it right now, of where it's at. But I can tell you that it is in there after being, in charge of these people. The residential is $50 and commercial is $250, that's what they were charging.
Yeah, so, and then basically, I guess, in the right-of-way, the way the ordinance reads today, any kind of spray head, any kind of,
Rotors,
everything, sky's the limit, and
Right.
there's no restrictions.
right, there's no restrictions.
Okay, so, having said that, what, from your all's recommendation, or recommendation to this committee, what type of, if the big issue that we're getting is the overwatering, I guess if people are leaving their irrigation system on for an extended period of time and it's running off into the street, or I've seen some items, even though they're at the property line, because of the type of head, they've got those, and that water, you get any kind of like little wind, and that whole sidewalk is full of water, and then even into the pavement, depending on where it's at, and, if the wind is coming from the south and you've got that lot, you've got that sprinkler head, that water's going straight into the pavement just with the wind. So if we wanted to, what can we do, or what can we limit so that like wind doesn't create the water from, or overwatering doesn't?
So I think we're looking at two different issues. Issue one is lowering the water that's used, and issue two is a street problem, okay?
Okay.
The street problem, I would probably ask somebody that's more of an expert on streets and see if that's gonna be, maybe John.
Street problem from what respect?
Well, the erosion of the streets, I think, is one of the problems, that the water is saturating the streets and causing erosion of the streets.
Right, well, because we've got too much water, there's a water is hitting the pavement.
Well, that's the concern that I've heard, but I don't know if that's actually, correct or not. So as far as lowering the amount of water, the kinds of plants and trees and grass that's used here in Laredo would make a huge difference on how much water is used to make those plants and trees survive. If you're using San Agustin, you're gonna need a lot of water. But if you switch to a El Toro Zoysia or a Bermuda or something like that, you'll have less water requirements. By having less water requirements, you also help the situation of not having to overwater and then the water running into the streets and stuff. Yes,
In your opinion,
yes.
since you do this all over the city, do you really think that the watering into the streets is eroding the streets? I know John does.
You're the expert.
No, but you guys are out there.
I'm an expert on streets, so
You guys are out there.
I'm
You see
the
this every
expert.
day.
John Orfila, for the record, yes, 100%. There's no doubt.
I agree.
And we've gone into that already.
Yeah.
So if you want to lower the amount of watering, then we have to change the landscape a little bit and start changing the types of grass and trees and plants and stuff that are allowed here in Laredo.
Mr. Ken, let me just ask a question. Well, I guess 25 years ago, we did, I think it was named Heritage Park out on 59, and we wanted it to be first class and everything like that. And we put in Bermuda for all the things we talk about. If you go out there now, 25 years later, or even if you went out there a year later, the local residents all pulled up the Bermuda and planted San Augustine.
It's because
You know,
it's allowed.
yeah, I just don't know how
Everybody
how
wants-
politically it'll sell. I agree with
Everybody
you
likes
100%.
the wide blade San Agustin grass, and plus, it's one of the grasses that does better in shade. But you can do El Toro zoysia, which does well in shade, and it has a lower watering requirement. And it would be, the city would have to do an ordinance saying, no more San Agustin, and therefore, you know, the grass suppliers would not be able to sell it. So the people wouldn't be able to change the grass.
But what about the issue, even if we upgrade to a grass and trees that are more, that fit into this climate? Where, and I've seen it before, I've seen people overwater dirt. You're still gonna have people overwatering even though the plants require less. And I like your point. But I don't know if the citizens to the politicians will agree to get rid of their beloved St. Augustine. And so, you know, hopefully next couple meetings, we can get all this up and get it to the city council, because I know it's an important part. And we've been on this paving ordinance for 4 years. We've had experts upon experts, and John showed us pictures. Yes, overwatering does have a huge effect on the roads. It seeps into the cracks in our curbs, and if you've got a high PI soil, you start seeing buckling immediately. So we gotta keep the water off the roads.
If we're irrigating, the typical landscape section on a right-of-way is gonna be anywhere from, say, once you allow for the sidewalk, is gonna be anywhere from, say, 5 feet to 3 feet, depending on the type of right-of-way?
I personally, if it was up to me creating a new ordinance, I would not allow spray heads or rotors between the sidewalk and the curb. Most of the spray heads that are out there require a certain amount of distance. When you cut it down to 3 or 4 feet, it makes it very difficult to water. You have to put tons of heads. If I was doing it, I would either just xeriscape it with no irrigation, or I would put drip irrigation. In San Antonio, if you go Stone Oak Parkway, they removed all the spray heads and they put nothing but drip irrigation through all of Stone Oak Parkway.
And the drip irrigation as opposed to like a bubbler, what's the difference?
It's a hose that goes underneath the ground, and it has emitters that are built into the hose every so many inches.
It's that brown pipe, or I've seen it kind of like that little brown pipe. Okay.
Yeah, they have
So,
orange,
If
brown,
you have,
black,
if you have a drip, if you have that drip irrigation and you have a tree, does one substitute for the other, or do you need both?
You can use drip irrigation on everything.
Everything. So in other words, if you have a tree, you just
You
run
can
the.
you can do rings of drip irrigation around the tree, and it waters the whole root system of the tree.
Okay. What?
That sounds to me like the most appropriate thing to do, you know.
Okay, but I guess the question is, do we, if we're trying to limit the items that can be placed in the right of way, do we absolutely, to keep a tree alive, do we need a bubbler?
No.
No. Okay, so the bubbler, we can just eliminate that, and every tree would make it, or no drip, or one or the other, I guess. If you only have a series of
You
trees.
also have less broken lines, because if a car drives over a head, it breaks the line, and then you've got water shooting up in the air. If you've got drip lines that are buried, 5-6 inches deep, and so if a car runs over it, it's not gonna do anything to it.
And the drip line, you can have a standard PVC, and then you just connect the drip line at the end, right?
That's
So-
correct.
Okay, and then continue again with PVC and put another drip line.
That's correct.
Now, you either have, your drip zones are separate from your other zones.
Okay,
Everything has to be separate, your spray heads, your rotors,
that
your drip.
eliminates the broken items.
The hydraulic is very different. The hydraulic on that is very different. When you use a drip system to a regular system, on the heads, the GPMs come out different than the drip system itself. Let's say you're asking for 15 PSIs on one valve, and the drip system is asking you for 4. So, it varies.
Okay, so there,
But
based on, and I don't know if anybody else, if the committee were to make a recommendation based on the comments that only a drip system would be allowed in the right of way, is there anybody that it would be against it, would be against that? Yes, we want to state your name and,
Gerardo Fonseca, work for Yard. I oppose the drip line and the right of way because really the soil here, it's all clay. When you bury the line that has, the water doesn't, go directly next to the other line, it just stays on the little trench. And if you have grass, you're just gonna have bits of grass green. That's it.
okay.
It's all clay. For the drip line to work, it has to be almost on the top and kind of covered with sand so the water can distribute evenly under the grass. Otherwise, you're just kind of sealing the pipe. Thank you.
Okay, that's assuming we have grass on the right of way, right?
And when we got clay, let me ask you, this, why can't they be installed that way? Close to the surface and,
They can be installed like that, but it's more expensive to the landowner or to the builder because now you have to bring sand or special soil on top for the water just distribute evenly underneath. It's all clay here. You dig a hole and you put water. Next day, the water's still there.
if I may, taking into consideration what he said, it is true where the water gets logged, we get waterlogged. There's areas in the city that we have water veins where the water is just causing erosion through the streets anyway. But in this case, we're looking at water conservation. And water conservation to us is very important right now. And we want to go ahead and succeed on that. What we're looking for is what they're saying. If we can change the system of having a right-of-way part that is going to work for the customer as well as for the city, I think that would,
So,
yeah.
I guess, so to further clarify the issue, will a drip system work provided you prepare the soil and you design the system according to the soils?
Yes,
Yes, it's just more expensive.
it's more
Yep,
expensive.
yep,
Okay.
definitely.
or someone mentioned early on the idea of just not having any type of watering system in the city right away. And then going to some type of granite, crushed granite or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're still gonna have
Maybe
trees
call-
and stuff like that, Danny.
Mainly what is called a zero-scaping in front. That's mainly what it is. You're not gonna have any water systems on that. No matter where you go, you will have water logging anywhere you go. That system, depending on what soil is there, even if it's clay, it's gonna log up right away, and the water's gonna drip into the street. But we need to take into consideration, like, every irrigator has a different way of doing things. But if you put a topsoil or you put a sandy soil, it'll work for the area where it's at. And that's what they're mainly doing. Because of the hydraulics of all the system that we have, we're not gonna get it right all the time. You know, or at least I see it that way as an inspector. Going through it for the longest time, I see so many different things, and I have to go talk to the customers and I have them understand that when they move the system themselves, because they don't call the irrigators to go, hey, wait a minute, I have too much water, or I don't spray enough. They change it, and they go up to 10 minutes instead of 5 minutes, and it's very hard for them to go and blame the irrigation system or the industry for something that customers also do.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Yes.
And somebody mentioned a little while ago that you have to get a special permit to irrigate the city right away, and the customer has to pay for that permit to water the city property?
Because there is a certain permit for the engineering department has a right-of-way. From the curb inward, there's that part of the city right-of-way requires a permit. And the irrigators need to be certified or licensed to be
bond
be able
stuff to work on
to
the
get
right of way.
bonded.
Yeah,
to
but
get
you're
in the right
asking,
way.
my question is, you're asking the homeowner to pay for a permit to irrigate city right away?
Right, but it says, everything we do in the city right away, we've got to get a right of way, permit.
Just like
No,
sidewalk.
I don't mind
Yeah.
getting a permit, I'm just saying that you're asking the homeowner to pay to
We still pay.
water city property.
For the application, yeah, for that. Well, we'd rather them not water it at all.
Right.
We still pay the taxes on it.
Homeowner has
And
to
at the
pay
end, we still pay the
a
taxes on it.
sidewalk permit, and the sidewalk is on city right away. It's the same thing. And there's an ordinance that says the adjacent property owner is responsible for that property between his property line and the curb.
Okay.
Did anybody else want to make any comments, Raul?
I'm Raul Santos, I'm a local irrigator here. But I think the biggest challenge here is to educate the consumer and the homeowner. They're the ones that are really overwatering more than they should. And I think that's where the main problem is here, because as far as designing and installing, I mean, we're all professionals here. I mean, we abide to certain standards or high standards that are imposed on us as irrigators. And the biggest issue is the homeowner, overwatering. I mean, they feel that they should just keep watering dirt, over and over. That's the biggest part of this problem.
What, I guess, outside of the right of way, what are assuming that some of the sprinkler heads, because one of the suggestions was to move the sprinkler heads further away from the right of way. What challenges does that present to be able to,
It's not legal.
I'm sorry?
It's not legal
It's not legal to,
to put your heads, in order for it to be legal, the heads have to completely overlap. So this head has to spray over here, and this head has to spray over here and completely overlap. If you put them only over here, spraying towards the street, it's not a legal system. And the reason is because the way sprinklers are designed, the closer to the head, the more water it puts out. So if you have 5 gallons, 4 gallons, 3 gallons, 2 gallons, 1 gallon, okay, then it's not evenly watering. But if you overlap it this way, then you have 5 gallons, 4 gallons, 3 gallons, 2 gallons, 1 gallon. So now everything gets 6 gallons. So you can't put the heads further away from the curb and have them all water in. You're not going to have uniform watering. And it's going to cause a bigger problem because then they're going to really start overwatering to compensate for that uneven watering. So the only way to do it is to put, if nobody wants to put grass, then great, they can just put xeriscape. But if there's that, few people that do want grass or whatever, then we have to give them some type of an option, and the only option would be drip. And if they want to go through the expense of putting the grass, then they have to go through the expense of preparing the soil to accept that type of watering.
Yep.
so you're saying the drip will work for turf grass?
Yes, drip will work for anything.
Yeah, the people can just excavate, and replace the soil in the right of way.
And how does the water travel when you use the drip to be able to handle the turf grass? I'm just, educate me, I guess.
So let's say you have a drip line and you have emitters every, let's say, 12 inches, okay? So you put your drip lines, but you stagger the emitters so that now they're every 6 inches. You've got one here, and one here, and now they're every 6 inches. And so the water just kind of bubbles out and it spreads to a little 6-inch area.
And they're on the surface or they're underground?
No, it's all underground, subsurface. And the technology's really gotten much better. They've got herbicides built into the drip lines so they don't get clogged with roots, and technology's gotten pretty good with drip systems.
And what's the delta, I guess, the difference in, assuming that you had, 4,500 square feet of turf grass in the front yard, and you had to go from spray heads to drip?
It's gonna be more expensive. It takes
But
more time to.
But aren't we just talking about the right of way? at this,
Well, we're talking about trying to remove the overwatering situation. And there's concerns, I know somebody was talking about, the wind, and I've noticed it. In other words, when you've got those spray heads and you got any kind of wind, I don't remember who was talking about,
At the last meeting, they were talking about.
Santos Reyes, right?
Well, Santos Reyes and I, if you remember at the last meeting, Ramon Chavez presented some pictures and it looked like the heads were right up at the property line and they were spraying towards the street.
Yeah, they were all, in other words, when I looked at it, not knowing what you talked about, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or whatever it is, I sent an email to Mr. Chavez and some people. I said, looks like they got too many sprinkler heads. In other words, after digesting that photo overnight, it's like they're all too close to each other. It's like we have too many sprinkler heads. Was it designed correctly? Was there a permit pulled? Was there, that was my immediate question. And then you get any kind of wind, and that sprinkler head, even though it's 5 feet away, you get any kind of wind because it's, it's.
You have to set certain parameters for the irrigator, and at the same time, you've got to kind of trust the irrigator to design properly. In San Antonio, they had a program where they got rid of as many spray heads as possible, and they would even give the homeowner or the business or whatever a credit for switching to either drip or like the Hunter, the.
Mist?
Yeah, they had certain types of spray heads.
What? No, the ones that shoot the fingers.
Oh, the rotary nozzles.
Rotary nozzles, they sit on a spray head, you just change the nozzle, and it's like a mini rotor. It shoots little fingers of water, but you don't have a spray that can blow away as easily. It's more little fingers of water, and so it has less problems with the wind blowing it away. And so the city of San Antonio did that, and they said, look, we'll give you, $30 for every spray head that you change into a rotary nozzle. So that would be one idea, is to start trying to get, the irrigators to use more rotary nozzles instead of spray heads.
So I guess going back to my question on the difference and the cost. So assuming that it's correct, that the overwatering, is getting into the street, and we wanted to, limit, the potential for this water to getting out there. What would be the difference in cost going to, say, drip only in the front yard, and in the backyard, you can use whatever kind of spray heads you want, right? But we're focusing on that front yard and the water getting out into the street. If you were to have a 4,000 square foot lot, or 4,000 of turf out there, or 5,000 of turf, is it $1,000 more? Is it $500 more? Just,
I would have to do a calculation and try to estimate it. I don't know, does anybody else have?
But it's more expensive.
Square footage, yeah.
is it considerably more?
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, you're gonna redo the whole system.
On it?
It's gonna be like double what.
Yeah, I would probably guess double. Plus you have the cost of making sure you have a decent quality soil in the, 4 inches or whatever of your front yard. Because, like Jerry said, I mean, if you do have hard packed clay, it's not gonna work as well.
but why can't we consider some type of consideration using the drip lines in the right of way closest to it, and then going to a more sophisticated sprinkler head, like the ones that shoots fingers for the rest of the front yard?
Because I know,
That's what I would.
And then do something different, and then the backyard continue with the same
yeah,
system that everybody uses.
just in case, I was trying to just look into the irrigation ordinance. There's a section on the design, and I'll just read it there. No irrigation system will be allowed within 48 inches from the back of curb, except for a drip system. So that comment's kind of already, in essence, kind of stated in there.
But Victor, aren't they getting away from,
You're,
by
further
getting a
back?
right-of-way? By getting a right-of-way, permit?
It's on page 16 of,
Page 15, 16. Is that
What
the one
section
that they
number is
have?
it?
of the,
Some of them didn't bring it.
section 25-90, number 4.
Okay, there's a 25-84 design criteria for irrigations, and then a 25-90 you said?
25-90 C4
Correct.
is where I saw it. Is that right, Victor?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, it says no irrigation systems with be allowed, because there's a typo in there.
I printed this out myself.
Or,
What, the email?
You can prepare it.
is there any right of ways that are more than, I think with now, with the ordinance, when you look at it and you look at what the pavement section is and then what the sidewalk is, you're left with 2.5.
Yeah,
I mean, like
typically with residential, local roads, from the back of curb to the right of way or the property line, it's essentially like 9.5 feet, generally speaking. So if you already have 4 feet, that's the sidewalk, that's already 5.5, pretty much pending.
So in other words, basically this ordinance says that the sidewalks are 4 feet, right?
Correct, which is, yeah, typically
So
they're
you can-
abutting the curb. So pretty much that 5.5 feet, that they have to be the dripplers irrigation, yeah. So that's already stated.
But it's being circumvented by just getting a right-of-way permit.
Correct, yeah. And that might have been my flaw, not noticing, yeah.
Would that also go for commercial? Would that also fall in commercial?
Well, it talks to the right of way.
Yeah. Just
For the back of the curb, so in other words, on the back of curb is inside the right of way. I don't know of any instance where the back of curb is at the end of the, at the end of the right of way. I don't know, there might be some old areas. of town.
You've got some older areas where the sidewalk is pushed away from the back of curb, but in most of the current subdivisions, we're
curb.
setting the sidewalks from back of curbs.
Yeah, the older subdivisions, you had back of curb, you had a strip of grass, and then you had the sidewalk.
Yeah, but pretty much even with that gap, that 48-inch rule, like regardless if you have like 2 or 3 foot gap from the sidewalk, that 48 is still gonna push you back beyond the sidewalk. So pretty much anything from the sidewalk to the curb, you can't have any type of irrigation, yeah.
Well,
And so it goes back to the concept that they're
But
presenting about the
if in the right
drippers.
of way, we can accomplish, within the right of way, we can accomplish it with drip, why even allow anything else? If we can accomplish it with drip.
And out of curiosity, just the dripplers, just the way they work, I guess from my end, when I see the irrigation head, I see that pattern when it comes to the drippler. Does it push up to a certain limit?
You just need a permit.
No.
Try to say it again?
I guess interpretation.
No,
Yes, sir.
I guess
I'm
yes,
with Commissioner John Orfila for the record again. What is it that we're trying to accomplish?
I think we're trying to accomplish less water, overwatering, right? And situations where you're just trying to water, but the water gets to the street, like when.
So we want to stop the water on the first 9.5 feet from going into the street. Eliminating the water, the first 9.5 feet?
Well, I think there's 2 concepts. I think there's a concept from not just the water that's immediately next to it, but some of that water probably travels from, based on what I've seen, in other words, once they saturate, depending on how the zones are set, if the zones start at the street first, and then they work their way back, if you're overwatering that back one, and you've got that slope going to the street, that water from the back one is also potentially getting out into the street because everything's already saturated.
Eventually, it's all gonna end up in the street. If it's clay, with time, might not be the first week, remember, that house will be there for the next 20 years.
Well, it gets
With the
saturated, so
irrigation
it's gonna
system.
travel through the surface, yeah.
Through the surface, over the sidewalk, under the sidewalk, into the street.
With this, I know that we're trying to eliminate time. time, because the first 2 minutes, sometimes grounds do get waterlogged right away. But here again, if you back it up, it gives it time for it to come back down. And by the time it gets over here, it's a lot less water coming into the street than it is in the property itself.
Be more towards the.
Yeah, it's just working from over there. If we're coming down a hill, there's a lot of houses here in Laredo that have a hill.
You said the first 2 minutes?
The first 2 minutes.
Right, they irrigate for 15 minutes, so there's still
Sometimes it
13
was-
minutes
yeah,
that's gonna
sometimes
go.
it-
The average house here is 15 minutes per section.
Yeah, but John, we also have 30, 40-year-old subdivisions I was involved in, minimum old, paving standards, medium, high PI, and those roads have been there,
What part of town?
Ria was just, talking about, Las Brisas. Yeah, what we're
point do
trying
you
to
wanna make?
prevent is the water off the roads.
What's the point that you want to make, or what's the what do you want to communicate?
Well, number one, the French ring was, again, didn't go anywhere due to, again, the cost savings for the residential homes. And here we are talking about a system where they now gotta excavate X amount of feet, put a drip system, gonna cost double, and it's not gonna guarantee anything. So again, I don't think, I mean, talking to the utilities director, the only way there is a chance that this would work is, again, by putting a limit on the irrigation systems. And you get so many gallons per month. You go over, you pay. Now you're gonna monitor your water.
Yeah.
Because as of right now, y'all can't tell me, and they've told me to my face in different places where they're over irrigating, but when you pay for my water bill, then you can tell me how much to throw. Other than that, I can do as much water as I want. And as far as doing the type of grass you want, if I want San Agustin, I'm gonna put San Agustin. And you guys work for the landowners, for the customers. I want my water, my grass to be green. You're gonna put more water for my grass to be green.
You're not gonna get any argument from me that cost is gonna deter.
That's the only way you can
Yeah,
get it.
I've made that comment at several of the meetings. I know I've made that comment to Mr. Riazul that, you know, that the cost is gonna create less consumption. I mean,
Rita said you get
when
5,000 gallons for every $5 if you go over. Every time you go over a certain amount, it's gonna be $5 for every 1,000.
Our position here is not to quote any prices, but as you see gas go up, SUV sizes go down, gas goes down, then people start buying the SUV. So that's a good, you know, that's a good barometer, you know, the elasticity of demand for, you know, what you're willing to invest. But I think having, those comments are well received, and I think that's something that needs to be done. But we also need to put some precautionary items in the ordinance so that we do limit, you know, the amount of water that can potentially go in there aside, so that we have two safeguards. Safeguard number one is we're not watering as much in the front. And safeguard number two is, you know, if you're overwatering, you know, wasting water, pues pasa un poquito más. Ria, did you want to make a comment?
Riazul Mia with Utilities Director. I just want to show you, this is in April, our report. As you can see, if we calculate it, just an average homeowner use 8,000 gallons a month for your residential use. If you look at irrigation,
Where is that
home-
8,000, down?
That's the single family residential.
Is that
As you
that
can see,
89?
volume 480.82 million gallon. If you do average, they are using about 8,000 gallon a month. If you go
Where
to
is that
irrigation-
number? Can you point to that number? Just so that I can understand.
This
Okay,
number.
480, okay, volume.
And this is the account. So if you just divide, I'm just taking average homeowner are using about 8,000 gallon a month. If you go to irrigation, they are using about 16,000 gallon a month. Wow. Because irrigation meter, even if you use 16,000 gallon for your residential, your bill will be close to $150. But when you have irrigation meter, your bill is probably $25. They don't care. So you have to, to address these issues, yes, all these things, but also we have to look at a different rate for irrigation. If you use more than 5,000 or something, you hit it, and then how people gonna cut it down because it's hitting their pocket. So we can do all we want, but people are still gonna use it because it's cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, all these ordinances and everything that passed, we still never can account for the people factor at the end of it. When we sit around and spend years trying to design a perfect ordinance and human behavior still goes
Because
down
now
the
we
line.
have the same rate for residential use, irrigation, it's the same rate. So I think to address this issue, we also have to look at the irrigation rate as a separate than the residential rate and give a, say, 5,000 or 4,000 gallon, a fixed rate, and anything over that, you charge, like in residential, if you go over 30,000, you pay $4.90 per 1,000 gallon. We don't have too many customers use more than 30,000 gallon because it hits really hard, 3 times higher than the regular rate.
I agree. You know, I had a question for John, you know, it came up, the biggest problem I had with the French drain, it was soils over PI, about PI over 21, regardless of where you are, and if you're like on 359 and a low-end mobile home subdivision, where we got streets out there 20 years old, never been touched, but also no one has sprinkler systems. Hopefully we can come out of this that allows some flexibility for difference in designs. You brought up at the end of one meeting, but I think it should be on an individual basis. And I'm not a proponent of this, I'm just putting it out there. What about if you're in a high PI and your lot and PIs can differ and we don't want to start testing every deal on every lot, but why not just the simple membrane, installed right next to the curb?
Well, I think that already went to council.
Yeah, I'm just talking about when.
To me, I'm all for French drains. And again, depending on what part of town, what subdivision, what type of PI, again, you might have a high PI in any subdivision where it's gonna be a mobile home park, you're not gonna have irrigation system, you're gonna have 5 cars per lot. It don't matter to me, personally, I don't think you need a French drain.
Yeah.
So again, it all depends on the location, what type of home it's gonna be, what type of, again, if it's gonna, again, you have one house with an irrigation system, I think there's gonna be more with it. So again, every subdivision part of town is what would
So,
dictate.
how much topsoil does, I guess this is for the landscaping guys, how much topsoil do you need to be able to keep grass healthy?
Between 4 and 6 inches.
Yeah.
So if you had a concrete base and you had 6 inches of dirt, how much?
12. You have a concrete.
You have concrete base?
You need 12. It's gonna get hot underneath, nothing's gonna.
Or if you had like then I've heard that visqueen over time disintegrates. I don't know, I've heard that from Tony. I don't know that it does or doesn't. But he says it disintegrates, but if,
30 years later.
huh?
The one in my house that was built in 1971 still there.
The visqueen is still there. So in other words,
Let me, just to make a comment with raising there are extenuating circumstances. For example, I have a trailer park on the Mines Road. I have one water meter that was installed 40 years ago for the whole trailer park. It services 30-something units. If you give me, an allowance of a certain amount of water, well, you're affecting 30 different with 1 meter. And they already have a scale where the more water you use, the higher the water cost is. And so I don't have a way other than, creating easements and installing water lines and completely redoing the whole subdivision to be able to provide water meters for each individual tenant.
if your concern is the water utility rates, that's outside of our,
I understand that. I'm just saying that there are extenuating circumstances where it would be very difficult to limit the amount of water that you give per water meter.
No, I understand, and that's a totally different, I mean, I agree with Rhea, and I know Danny and I have kind of disagreed on some of these meetings, that price does affect.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with Rhea's numbers, and yeah, with the master meters, I'm sure Rhea, when you're putting together
But
something like this,
the meters,
I mean,
that's a different discussion, Danny.
yeah, I know, but Mr. Cam brought it up. I mean, when we've got a master meter, there's one out there at the Town North Mobile Home. When you got a master meter for a mobile home park, I mean, it wouldn't have the same limits as individual residential lots, would it?
Mr. Chairman, all my discussion was for residential. When you have a master meter for a mobile home park, that will be a commercial meter or multifamily meter. That's not a residential.
Okay.
You're talking single-family
Yes.
homes? Okay. So I would say a combination of, educating the consumer, drip in the right-of-ways, maybe limiting the types of high water use plants and grass and shrubs and stuff like that. Maybe a combination of everything would have the biggest effect.
I know, just in case, I know we've kind of touched components on irrigation designs, as he just mentioned, and when it comes to enforcement, one key, like Rhea suggested, was probably maybe the irrigation fees on the usage. The only component that we still haven't really touched is just the inspection, and I don't know if you guys want to speak any in regards to, that's a good point about the educating the public, but anything having to do with other forms of enforcement with like the water cops or anything like that? Because I have a feeling we will probably be asked that at council.
I think in this ordinance, are y'all real familiar with the ordinance?
Very familiar.
Okay, because like in the ordinance, it talks about educating the consumer. In other words, that's part of the, that's part of the, the irrigators' responsibilities. And then there's also some like pre-backfill inspections and that kind of stuff that I don't know that it's, whether it's being done, not being done, how important it is, not important, but that's the existing, in other words, that's the existing ordinance, is pre-backfill inspection, final inspection, demonstrating the performance of the system, checking, for 5 minutes, shall not exceed the calculated water for 15 minutes. So it talks about, there's a design, right? You all have to submit a design. And then at the end of the final inspection at the CO, kind of like for us or for me in home building, all the inspectors went and checked the home, and then there's a final guy that goes back and kind of like, we're starting all over, guys. We're gonna check the HVAC, we're gonna check the plumbing, we're gonna check this, we're gonna check everything one more time. I don't know that's currently happening. But assuming that it were to happen in the future, based on the ordinance, is it difficult to prove these things up? If you were calculating so much consumption of water in 5 minutes, is it difficult to prove it up at a final inspection, or is it easy to?
Well, what you're asking, yes, is true. We do go out there and check, which is the backflow and the valves, to make sure that they're connected properly. There is no testing whatsoever on that, only on the backflow that must be done.
Right, but the ordinance today calls for, it says the inspector shall witness the demonstration and verify starting and ending consumption readings of the water meter for each zone. Actual water consumption for each zone calculated over a minimum runtime of 5 minutes shall not exceed the calculated consumption for more than 15%. So that's what's in the ordinance today, right? In other words, so you present a plan.
Look,
How my question is, how practical is
The ordinance
it?
is not being followed. It's impossible. It's impossible for one inspector to be able to follow all of the inspections that the ordinance requires. 90% of the problems that the city has with irrigation are not with the licensed irrigators. It's with the little guys that come across from Nuevo Laredo, they go buy their parts in Home Depot and they install the system on Saturday and Sunday. That's where 90% of the problems are. So, yeah, you do have a few issues with, probably a miscalculated design or something that we might have made a mistake on, but 90% of the problems aren't with us.
Right, so I guess there's no issue in verifying this.
No, what it is.
That's a question, in other words, I'm not, my question is.
I'm just saying it'd be impossible for one
Yeah.
inspector to be able to do all of the inspections that the ordinance calls for.
And I think with this conversation, what's really pointing out, which I think is a really, really good point that you mentioned, is we need more staff to really provide that adequate or that specific,
Well,
I guess that inspection, yeah.
The question that I'm asking is, it's simple. In other words, the ordinance is here. Is it possible to meet these inspection requirements without it being, buying new equipment or, that's a question I have. In other words, you have a design and then your test, you said it's gonna take so much water, for this zone. Is it difficult to?
Oh, no, they put all that in their design. They put all that in their design when they submit their plans. I do the plan review on it. And the minute that it passes, they'll call me for an inspection to go ahead and check it. Now, most of the time, when we go out there, or I go out there and take a look at that, I check and make sure that they have a test report and that the system works. But I don't stay there too long, for the simple reason is that the time consumption of what it takes to go ahead and do so.
So this is self-policed, but I guess are you all doing this? I guess what you communicate is being self-policed?
So far, well, we have utilities that have the utility department that go and check on the right-of-way. Santos Reyes has inspectors that check the right-of-ways, but I check the private end of it, which is from the property line end.
So in other words, if the ordinance, let's say this is the ordinance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's calling for certain items in the ordinance. And you said, because there is not enough staff or whatever, we're self-policing this. And at the point of certificate of occupancy, I'm giving you my document that says I was supposed to consume, 30 gallons of water, and it went 35, but it's still within the 15, or it went 30, 33, it went 10% more. I've already verified that my system is working according to.
I'm sorry to interject, but it goes back to the point, and Ria's deal. I've gone up before after I've had one of you guys come out and I live in an older house, but set sprinkler heads, and my wife likes everything real green, and next thing you know, we're adjusting the length of time and water. So even if the day we turn it over to the homeowner, a perfect irrigation system, as long as they can touch the damn knobs and controls, there's no way to do anything about it.
The amount of water the irrigation system puts out is solely based on time.
Yeah, and so hit them with some visual
You put it on
inspections.
for 1 minute, it's a lot less than for 100 minutes. And
You know,
the more you crank that knob, that's where all your watering goes. It has really nothing to do with.
Remember when we were in the drought, when we were in the drought conditions, and we had a city staff drive around, and you could, if you're out at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, you can see where the water's coming from. And find stiff fines, and then the biggest way to affect human behavior is ramp up those irrigation fees. If y'all are putting in an irrigation system that assumes that this is what the consumption should be, then ramp it up. Also, the things that you were talking, everybody talks about different type of grass and different type of trees. People aren't even going to consider that until they start getting the big water bills, and then all of a sudden it seems like a good idea. That's just my 2 cents, but some visual inspections, and then really hit it hard on the heavy waters.
Yeah, I agree. I'd want to make one comment real quick. Listening to Armand Van Loo for the record, listening to staff, I always like to listen to staff and what their needs are. They're the ones that do it day in and day out. And like John Guerrero said, and Director Linares, they need more staff. They need people to enforce things. I mean, like they said, you know, you come out at 6 in the morning, you start to see all these sprinkler heads that are busted and all these waters running. Well, if we're not staff reviewing it in prime time where the sprinkler systems go off, how are we able to catch those leakage and come back and charge the owners for that extra water until they fix it? Because sometimes they'll go 2-3 months without knowing it's fixed because their gardener just wants to go in and rake and leave. I mean, he might not be doing his job. He might show up after the sprinkler system's turned on. And so I think also we need to look at staffing the inspectors with adequate personnel so they can do their job if we're expecting them to follow the current ordinance or any other ordinance that we may or may not pass in the future.
Some
That's
people are
important.
calling in on 311, which is fantastic, because we go by and we
Right.
drop off a card if they don't answer, and they'll give me a call and I'll educate them then, you know.
Because I live in the Heights area and every time I see their landscaper, I'm like, hey, you know what, tell the neighbor over there that their sprinkler head is out because they're losing water and it's running all over the place. But that's just me. I don't know how long that's been running. And so anyways, I think having adequate staff is very important to any ordinance that we have.
Well, here again, I do emphasize 311 because we generate an inspection that we can go ahead and go out there and do. And then we have a report that lets them know that it's already been taken care of or addressed.
But the conversation that Mr. Chair was saying here was, if you had the time to check the sprinkler system against what they submitted and what was approved, could you adequately do that when you're there on site?
It takes 5 minutes to go ahead and check a system. It really does. You turn on every zone and you make sure that it's working.
Okay.
But if it's a 5-minute zone, we're not gonna stay there 5 minutes to make sure that it's gonna take the 5 minutes. We're not gonna stay there because of the time.
One point,
Systems are 40 stations.
Yeah.
Or more, that ain't there all day.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna check that zone for a minute and just kind of go through all the 40 stations or?
Yeah.
Or-
If you're there for 5 minutes per station, and
Okay.
you're working on a big commercial property, and you got at least 40 different.
I was referring to residential, but I see your point on commercial.
Yeah, but it applies to all the irrigation systems.
yeah, and one thing I want to point out about certain words used, I know when it comes from R and from building, pretty much the part that we can control it's mainly on the inspection part. And so yes, we would need more staff to be more specific on the inspection, but then it's like the policing or the enforcement part, that's a little bit different. And I'm pretty positive that's going to be one of the questions that council is going to ask for, because from our end, we don't police, after the fact. Pretty much once the irrigation is set, pretty much even from building side, we don't, have to address, if they have to adjust to that.
I'll read a little section here in the ordinance where it says, in section 31, 141.29, it says, if a meter, an irrigation system, or backflow device is found to be leaking on a private site, the property owner will be notified and issued a written warning for failure to repair a controllable leak. Failure to repair the private leak after the second warning will constitute a citation and incur the penalties established in this plan. So there are penalties in the ordinance.
Yeah, but the only thing is, I think that's part of the water conservation from our end, because even the policing part, like from our end, like, inspectors, they do work after hours a few times, but it's really from 8 to 5. And so when it comes to irrigations, that pretty much the system is really set for the evening or at night or early in the morning. And so for us to police, kind of like a water leak, it's kind of the hard part. And so, or maybe I guess where I'm leading to, we might need just assistance in how to address that. But I know for building, it'll be really hard to, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just saying it'll be hard for us to really verify that issue. So.
Well, you need more staff. Basically comes down to you need more staff to be able to police over the evening hours.
Yeah, and let me ask a question, Mr. Cantu. Don't we require a license to install a pool.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and someone, so why, it's the same thing that happens in all, a pool. Same thing happens in all of our industries. There's a few small guys or a few characters that, that are causing the trouble, and we all get punished for it. You know, I don't know why we couldn't limit, or license,
They are licensed.
okay, I thought, well, the
They're
bid,
required
well, so they're, the system's being installed by,
Right, so.
'Cause I just remember, I'm sorry, Tree, I just remember back in the day, you know, we had the water cops, I know those guys were pretty much 24, not that you had a whole bunch of them, but at least you had that one guy policing, that, at nights and stuff, it wasn't building, so I guess that's what I'm trying to push, like,
yeah.
I'm not trying to say that it shouldn't happen, but it should happen, but.
But building inspects
It's-
when it's the construction and the installation of the irrigation system.
Yeah.
After it's installed, it really is more,
Code enforcement.
Right.
Yeah, let me-
and that's one of the questions that was put on this, who should be enforcing the overwatering? You know, is it straight across the board? Is it code enforcement? Is it water cops?
So then private,
That's what we
just
there's
has
two
one,
issues.
okay.
Let me clarify the point. And at least from my standpoint, there's two issues. The first issue is, are we getting a quality system? Number one, obviously from the members that are here that are in attendance is because I want to provide a quality system. Number two, having a quality system, can we, in those areas that are close to, the right of way, in the front yard where the water is potentially easier by, natural events, getting that water into the, we should at least try to, get those resolved. And as far as, those people that are putting the irrigation systems that are not applying for permits, or the individuals that, I guess you're saying through the ordinance, they can, that they, just because they're gonna do it themselves, doesn't mean that they don't follow the requirements.
Sure. That's my question. Can any guy, everybody thinks they're a plumber, we're not requiring a licensed irrigation?
To get a permit, you need to have, you need
Yes,
to be
you need a
licensed, you need to be
licensed irrigator.
registered with TCEQ, I guess, and all that other.
Okay, so how are the little guys, installing systems?
To be honest, it's like any type of construction. We've had that issues, the policing part, that there's so much work to go on that it's really hard. We do a lot of stop work orders, like it's insane the amount of stop workers we do.
Yeah.
But even at that level of strictness that we do, there's still some guys who slide away. And so it does happen, yeah.
There's not enough inspectors to just to do the inspections that are there for the permitted work. Takes up a lot of their time. That there's very few inspectors that have time just to check to see who doesn't have a permit, are they working?
And to kind of add to point number two that Chewy brought in, about how do we get, do we want to suggest to the council of like this blanket ordinance that, granted, there's some old school subdivisions that might have a sprinkler head, like on the right of way, for instance. Do we want to suggest to council, like, hey, we give you a year, it might seem like a lot, but we give you a year for you to, remove that sprinkler head and do a dripper system. If not, you'll be fined, for.
I would never vote in favor. I would never vote in favor of that. I would never vote in favor of that, but I think just like what you do with code today, in other words, when somebody's going in there and they're doing a repair, there should be some kind of system to when you're going through a repair of your system, that you need to upgrade it if you're repairing a certain amount, or that maybe the city impose an inspection every couple of years. I can tell you, I have an irrigation system at my home. It was installed by Tony. I've been there, I've been there for years. I mean, I've been in the home for over 20 years, but now it seems like every year now, I have to go out there and call the guy. Sometimes twice a year I have to call him. It's kind of, okay, now you know, it's, I'm at a point to where, you know, things could start to fail because the system's 20 years old. You know, it's kind of, yeah. So maybe setting somewhere to where there should be some kind of maintenance. If you're gonna have a sprinkler system, that there be some kind of maintenance on the system, or monitor it through.
Victor, I think we can write it up. I think you have a hard time on new ordinances, with stuff that's grandfathered. But, I think if we can start making an impact right now, and I think it has to be a combination.
With the fee.
It has to be a combination of the fee. That's the great policing in the world. I didn't realize that people on irrigation systems were using that much water. And it'll sure change people's attitude when they're having to pay that big bill. And then, the little guys, they're hard to stop, but to hook up to an irrigation meter, shouldn't someone have to present a license?
Back to his
Yes,
question.
before a irrigation meter is installed, utilities department verifies that, one, an irrigation permit was issued.
Okay.
Two, a backflow preventer has been registered and is installed at the site. And most of the time, when they come for an irrigation meter, they also verify whether it's going to be either a T connection or a new service. Now that the service price went down for this last April 1st, it makes it easier for get a service for a irrigation meter. So when the issue is not when they get so many an irrigation meter, it's more when they're using the domestic meter and they just installed an irrigation system off of the line that's going for the domestic. Because many times they come in, it's an existing irrigation system, I just want a meter. And it was already installed. Did it have a permit, did it not, at that time, you're not gonna make them, it's already installed. Now, it could be, it's already installed last week, or it was already installed last month or last year. You know, it's already installed. That's what we get a lot.
Well, I got confused there for a minute, but, all these non-licensed irrigation contractors going in, can the owner get an irrigation meter?
Yes,
If it's his homestead.
exactly. If it says homestead, he can get one.
So, yeah.
He brings in a
So
design.
isn't that a little bit of a loophole to have
Yes.
a non-licensed
Yes.
irrigation contractor pick
The
up
code
a
allows that.
irrigation
That's
meter?
state law.
Unfortunately, yes, it is a loophole.
But we don't release irrigation meter unless there is a plumbing permit at a backflow.
Correct.
So even the homeowner requested it, still those two needs to be.
Yes.
Yes, they need to hire the services, either a master plumber or a licensed irrigator, to go ahead and get the permit, to go ahead and install the backflow and have it tested. And installation of that backflow has to be proper by a licensed person before the customer can go ahead and do his, system.
So, okay, so if I'm Jesus Ruiz and I want to apply for an irrigation, for an irrigation permit, what do I need to present to you?
You need to turn in a design to me. And the first thing that's gonna happen is that you're gonna go to the utility department and they're gonna deny you. And they're gonna tell you that you need a permit. And you can't get the permit for the meter itself. It has to be done by a licensed irrigator or a licensed installer, which is a plumber also.
So you're gonna direct, you gotta get a plumbing permit first
Yes.
before you can apply for the,
No, you can turn in your design, but you'll have it in writing. You'll say, hey, before you can get your permit as a homeowner, you need to get the services of a licensed irrigator or a licensed plumber to get the permit.
If I may, Mr. Chair, sometimes the homeowner comes in and installs it, and then by the time they come in, they're like, now I want a meter, but it's already installed and it was not by a licensed irrigator.
so you can't have them.
I mean, they're saying, I did it, but you don't know if there's an irrigator that's not licensed that's doing the work.
We're doing it.
Right, but,
You're fly-by-night.
but do they not follow the same criteria that
That is
You know,
correct.
these guys,
If
you
they know there's a loophole and the owner can come in and apply as a homestead for their,
But they don't have to comply with the amount of water per station, they don't
Yes,
have
when
to,
you call
why
me,
not?
when you come in to go ahead and ask if you can do your, I'll give you an example of what you need to write down, of what you need to do to turn in your design. I'll give you an example on that. So you take it with you and you look it up, because most of the people go to Lowe's or they go to Home Depot and they buy all the materials, and Home Depot themselves will go ahead and make a system plan for them. And then they turn that into me.
So if somebody's coming in pidiendo perdón en vez de permiso, which is a typical, you know, typical
Yes.
saying, the saying in Spanish, right? Mejor pedir perdón que pedir permiso. Can you have them, give you a reverse engineering of what they did? I require that before, in other words, you have to comply with so we need to verify that you comply.
the only thing we ask for is that they provide a backflow preventer at that stage.
Well, but why not, but you're circumventing the system, in other words, at that
Because they
point-
argue that it's already installed.
It doesn't matter. You installed it.
I understand.
You should have pulled a permit.
I
They
understand.
should have pulled a permit.
You're
If they
getting
get
into the
caught, they
situation.
get cited.
Well,
They get cited if they get caught.
If I may, I think the original idea of the meeting was water conservation and the problem with the streets.
Problem with the streets.
Okay, so the design of the system and whether it's properly engineered or designed is really a minor portion of what we began talking about. We've put a lot of time and effort into the design and whether we're doing it correctly or not. I think that we really need to focus on what we set out to achieve. I know we're going into inspections and whether it's done right or wrong, but the big idea here was the right-of-way and whether we should have irrigation in the right-of-way. And it's pretty simple. It's either you put drip or you don't put anything at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, no, we've got that noted.
And then, everything else, it's the enforcement, the charging more for the water. This is not just Laredo, it's the whole country. Irrigation takes up the majority of the water that's used everywhere. In every home, in every city, irrigation is the big user of water. So we just want to try to minimize that and be more efficient.
Okay. That's well said. I have a question for Mr. Mia that you brought up, Roland. Just because someone hooks in, doesn't have an irrigation meter and hooks into their regular water meter, we can, well, with all the numbers you've got on water usage, we can set some type of a benchmark that says, you know, over so many gallons, then you're going to, because the only other thing they can do is basically irrigate. I'm just trying to say, just because we can still have a increasing rate that increases at an increasing level for overuse of the water, even when they have just a residential meter.
Mr. Chairman, if somebody does it, remember, water rate has escalating rate. So when you are over 30,000 gallon, you're paying close to $5 per 1,000 gallon. Plus, you're paying sewer also.
But what if you're one of the smaller guys that's overwatering, and you're using 10,000 for or 15,000 for irrigation? You're not getting penalized, or there's no incentive for you to.
Because that 10,000 or 15,000, because it's also a cost benefit. If I'm using, including irrigation, say 10,000 gallon for my home, my bill is still manageable. I don't want to go to $3,000 or $4,000, because what I'm saving, $20, I'm not making money for last 5-7 years. But the moment you have irrigation system, you're using, say, 20,000 gallon and your home is using 8,000 gallon, now you're paying that 20,000 gallon, just the sewer bill gonna kill you. So now, because it's the sewer kills it, which is
Okay, I
higher
got
rate
you.
than the water.
Yeah, I got you, okay.
So,
Yeah.
There is
But then in those situations, what happens is they started coming in and asking for irrigation meters. Because there was a lot of situations that already existed like that. And I wanna say in 2015 and 16, there was a big jump in irrigation meters. Because, it was,
The rate.
the rate
And
was
also, we
cheaper.
realized, because it takes almost $3,000, including taps. So we encourage the homeowner to get new tap, irrigation meter, that's why we lowered the tap fee. So now you pay, say, $1,600, $1,500, including meters and new tap, everything. And if you can save $30, $40, yeah, you can make up that money in the next 4 years. Because water rate every October is going up, same as sewer rate. So it's hitting you in both ways.
I got you.
I would like to, I guess, move a motion if I may, and people chime in, please. Move a motion, have Rhea present that table to look at of what his recommendation is on the cost increase over X amount of gallons per residential home. Maybe you already have it, Riazul, or not?
No, we're going through a water rate study, but that's one thing we didn't get direction from council, but if you guys make
you
the
didn't have
motion,
any-
I will ask the consultant to run a model so we can present it.
Yeah, I like that motion, so with this thing, we don't languish in committees for months and months, because it's been brought out, there's just a few points, we raise the rates. I personally say, in the city right away, in that first 9.5 feet, the only thing that should go in there is a drip line.
Let me also just add, if he's gonna do a calculation, or if the city wants to do a calculation on how much water is necessary, they have to determine what type of plants and grass and turf and everything they're gonna design that amount for. So, for example, if it's Bermuda grass, you need 1.25 to 1.5 inches per week of water or rainfall. That equates to a little over 7 gallons per square yard, okay? So he needs to calculate how much water that's gonna be to make that lawn survive, and then say to the owner, okay, this is enough water for your landscape to survive. We're gonna give you this amount of water. But if you go over that, then you're gonna have to start paying more. And that makes sense, but there has to be a calculation based on the type of landscaping that you're gonna design that calculation for here in Laredo.
And along with Mr. Can, and then also it ought to be factored in the square footage, the area, obviously that'll calculate into your tabulation. How would you plan to do that, Rhea? Because
A normal home basically is about 500 square feet, in the frontage area.
Yeah, and if somebody wants a bigger yard, they're just gonna have to pay more
So
money.
it's gonna be kind of hard for him to go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have those data, but the data I have, we have the meter size and we know how much consumption. We can run, okay, on this irrigation meter, 3,000, whoever used 5,000 gallon. We can run a report and say, these are the homes run 5,000 gallon, come up with an average, these are the homes, and by looking at that, you will see where the homes are. It's pretty much, there will be 1 or 2 homes use more water, but most of those people will be, I say 16,000 gallon, but some of them probably definitely has their swimming pool filled up with irrigation meter.
and those that have extra landscaping would end up paying more, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just have a few more questions to ask you.
Yeah.
One is for the irrigators, do you think that the city has excessive requirements for you guys? Do you have to meet excessive permits?
I think they're in line with many other cities.
Another question I have for you is, are rain sensors required? Because, not that it rains here for a whole week in Laredo, but if it did rain for a whole week, are sprinklers still coming on when it rains?
Do you have to have sensors, are those required?
Yes.
Are they being installed?
Well, I don't really do residential, I only do basically commercial, and yes, we install them on all the commercial sites.
Another question I have, has the city fined anybody for doing illegal irrigation systems? You have fined a lot of people for doing that?
They go out there and do the irrigation, they don't pull a permit, they get cited, even if he's licensed, he gets cited. Anybody who's doing work on the right of way, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, we got this person that did an irrigation. It takes me maybe 2 to 3 days to get there sometimes, for the simple reason that they already did it. So they're not gonna go anywhere. The person who's gonna really pay the brunt of it is the owner, because they hired somebody without a license to begin with. But it does get done.
Another question I have, in my job, I need to know where your zones are and where the valves are for those zones. And sometimes in most of the homes that I see, those zone valves are scattered all over the backyard or the front yard, whatever. And it's very hard to locate them for the homeowner too, you know. So if you have to shut off a valve because there's a leak in the sprinkler, isn't there a requirement that those zone valves be placed in such a way that in one place only instead of scattered all over the backyard?
No.
And they get covered by the grass and then you don't see them anymore?
No.
There's no requirement of where you place those zone valves?
No.
Should there be?
No.
Because in my case, there should be, because if I want to shut a zone.
We don't have it because a homeowner or an irrigation system, when they set it up, the valves, some of them make them all in one place. They'll put 5 valves in one box. And then others want them in a separate area where the system is shorter, so that the hydraulic capacity that they're designing will fit that area. So it won't be so long.
Well, let me tell you
why I
what.
have heads all over the place. But one of the things that I do recommend the people to go ahead and do is that they have to hire an irrigator to go ahead and locate those valves if you can't find them. You have to find those tracers in order for you to get to those valves.
Right. Let me
Before
tell
they
you.
start the construction.
Yeah, let me clarify why we need to know those things, because let's say home builders or home improvement individuals who want to build a cabaña or an additional bedroom, and they need to close that zone, you know, rather than just tearing it up when you excavate, you know, in my case also, when we're building a swimming pool, we end up destroying the whole system, you know, because we don't know where the zone valves are. So shouldn't there be a place where you can always more or less designate the zone valves be placed in one location or something?
There is room for that. We can request that. But one of the things is, as a contractor, I'm gonna come in, I need to make sure where everything is. If I have a system in my way, I need to call somebody to go ahead and find it for me. I don't wanna have any problems. The only difference is that the system itself, from the zone valve itself, outward where the heads are at, there's no tracers on it. There's nothing there. Until you run into the pipe, the main line that has the wiring, that's where you're gonna have problems.
Yeah, I think if anything, we should just focus on the irrigation with regards to the pavement. The last comment or question for me is just on the rotary nozzle. Is it something that's expensive? That's, let's say if we want to change the spec from spray to that rotary nozzle, is it something that would be expensive for the customer, or?
You can't use rotary nozzles everywhere.
Okay.
But they do have patterns that can reduce the amount of spray heads that are used. And yes, they're a little more expensive. You're talking about a regular nozzle might be $1 or $2. A rotary nozzle might be $6 or $8.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a little more expensive, but it's not a huge expense. It goes on the same head. It goes on a spray head. You just.
I'm in agreement with the water conservation of it. And I'm also in agreement to go ahead and get an incentive if any people that have old areas that already exist and we don't want them in the right of way, we can give them those incentives to go ahead and work with them.
Because that could be maybe like a plus. Yeah, that's a good comment, John.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, because I know we might maybe hit him with a bigger fee, but you know what, if you do that rotary nozzle, because that's one concern that was presented, yeah.
That's, my opinion is that in conjunction with a, increased fee for water, there be an incentive to xeriscape, to give the homeowner an opportunity to work their way into that there's gonna be some that don't want a xeriscape, like Danny says, I want my San Agustin grass, and I'm gonna pay the big price, but at least give them some kind of transitionary period, or, maybe there is no upfront incentive, but you say, okay, you've got, over the next, X number of months to beef up your yard, but we need to, we're already 10 minutes past.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have a motion on the floor.
Yes, that's what I was just about to say, there was a
And
motion.
I'd like to, Armand, if you'd repeat it, I'd like to second it.
The motion started to have Riazul do a table on his recommendations on water, irrigation, water consumption.
And rights.
What were you adding?
Oh, just the rate and the rates to be, proposed rates to charge.
And the proposed rates to charge. I think that's what the consensus is of the staff, of the Public Works Director, Utilities Director, and I guess in the type of committee position is, I like to listen to staff. They do it every day, and I think going along with the consensus is the way to go. And I think, so that's where the motion is.
I'll second.
So there's a motion, there's a second, all those in favor? Or any discussion on this?
Yeah.
No discussion? Did you get the motion clear? The tape will say.
It's on the tape.
It's on the tape. All those in favor?
No.
So
I'll get it.
get a motion second, do we have a vote?
Yeah, that's what I said,
Okay.
there's no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, motion carries, Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll keep the track record.
I'll second that.
Motion and second, all.
Okay, just we need to establish when, we're gonna meet on June the 20th,
The meeting was already set, June the 20th.
and then the July meeting.
The July meeting, we'll just set it on June the 20th. That way give time for people to think about it. On the June 20th, we'll set the next meeting.
One
Did you
last
want,
comment.
I wanted to ask the committee, did you want to have, the irrigators or plumber?
I think the irrigator should, at the next meeting, I think we're gonna talk about again this issue of what goes into the right of ways. And I think we still need to talk a little bit more of what goes into that front yard. Just from the standpoint of, trying to address it in volume of water, and then maybe some of the other stuff that guys like Santos mentioned, when the wind comes out, what kind of stuff are we gonna put in the front yard? So I think that needs to be discussed.
I think you all need to consider, the last time we went into modifying irrigation ordinances, there was 2 or 3 meetings made there at Public Works with all the irrigators, because you're all gonna come up with something. And Ben, you might remember we had 50 irrigators there, 30 irrigators, coming to council, and it was a mess, and they tabled, and it's gonna get tabled.
Yeah.
So you all can make all the decisions you want to, but once the irrigators come here, when we have 2 or 3 of them here, there's a lot more out there. And if we don't please them also, all hell's done.
We gotta include everybody.
Yes, I mean,
What kind of communication did y'all make to the irrigators?
Either text or call them direct.
Everybody was advised.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
do it again.
Yeah, we need to redo it again. We need to post it at the,
And so again, it's gonna be on June the 20th.
June the 20th.
When's our next meeting?
Did we get a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Yeah, there was a motion by Danny and a second by Mrs. Salinas. All those in favor?
All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.